Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy had seen 3 centuries of warfare, commanded fleets that numbered in the thousands, and never once questioned the fundamental laws that govern civilized combat in space. Ships fought at maximum weapons range in orderly formations. Boarding actions were conducted through proper airlocks after formal surrender negotiations. Energy shields protected vessels until they failed in predictable patterns, allowing for honorable retreat when defeat became inevitable. The human vessel approaching his flagship violated every single one of these principles just by existing. "Sir, the alien craft is still approaching," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Veltar, her voice tight with confusion. "Range is now 30,000 kilometers and closing. They're well within optimal firing distance for both our weapons and theirs, but they haven't powered up any offensive systems we can detect." Kethvar studied the tactical display with growing unease. The human ship was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Where proper warships were sleek and symmetrical, this vessel looked like someone had taken a massive industrial facility and strapped engines to it. Bulky armor plating covered every surface in overlapping layers. Strange protrusions jutted out at random angles. Most disturbing of all, the ship's energy signature was completely chaotic. Power routing that should have torn the vessel apart, weapon systems that defied classification, and propulsion that seemed to operate on principles no civilized engineer would ever consider. "Have they responded to our hails?" Kethvar asked, though he already knew the answer. "No, sir. We've transmitted in all standard diplomatic frequencies, including first contact protocols. They're definitely receiving our signals. Our communications officer detected their scanning beams analyzing our transmissions, but they haven't acknowledged." The human ship continued its steady approach, neither accelerating nor changing course. Its trajectory would bring it within 5,000 kilometers of the Zephyrian flagship, far closer than any hostile vessel had ever been allowed to approach. "Sir, request permission to power weapons and prepare for combat," called out Weapons Officer Dracoon from across the bridge. "This approach pattern is highly aggressive by any civilized standard." Kethvar considered this carefully. The Zephyrian Empire had protocols for dealing with unknown vessels, but those protocols assumed the unknown vessels would follow basic principles of space warfare. A ship that approached this close without communication was either completely ignorant of galactic norms or so confident in its abilities that it didn't fear retaliation. "Negative," he decided finally. "We're not at war with these humans, and we don't start conflicts without clear hostile intent. Continue monitoring and prepare a full sensor analysis of their technology." What Kethvar didn't realize was that aboard the human vessel, a completely different conversation was taking place. Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Defiance stood in her ship's command center, which the Zephyrians would have found deeply unsettling if they could have seen it. Instead of the quiet, orderly bridge of a proper warship, the Defiance's nerve center buzzed with controlled chaos. Technicians moved between jury-rigged control stations. Multiple conversations overlapped as different departments coordinated through open comm channels. Warning lights blinked constantly as automated systems reported minor malfunctions that human engineering had learned to work around rather than fix. "Captain, we're getting the full diplomatic song and dance from the aliens," reported Communications Officer Martinez, not looking up from his jury-rigged console that combined salvaged alien hardware with human modifications. "Same stuff we heard from the Zephyrian contact team on the border. They want us to stop, identify ourselves, explain our intentions, probably invite us aboard for tea and philosophical discussions about the nature of civilized warfare." Chen nodded absently, her attention focused on the tactical display that showed the alien fleet's formation. 12 vessels arranged in a perfect hexagonal pattern, each ship exactly 15,000 kilometers from its neighbors, all maintaining identical heading and speed. It was the kind of textbook formation that looked impressive and made sense if you'd spent 10,000 years fighting wars where everyone followed the same rules. "Analysis of their weapons?" she asked. "Pretty much what we expected based on the intelligence reports," replied Tactical Officer Brooks, a former asteroid miner who'd learned combat the hard way during the Titan Rebellion. "Directed energy weapons with about twice the range of our main guns. They're designed for long-range dueling between ships with comparable defensive systems. Their targeting computers probably expect us to maintain current heading and speed while we exchange polite volleys until someone's shields fail. And their shields? Textbook Zephyrian military hardware. Strong against directed energy, decent against kinetic weapons traveling below relativistic speeds, probably never tested against anything creative." Chen smiled grimly. That was exactly what she'd hoped to hear. The Zephyrians weren't evil, or even particularly aggressive. Intelligence reports suggested they were actually quite honorable by their own standards, but they'd spent millennia fighting wars against opponents who shared their basic assumptions about how space combat should work, and those assumptions were about to become serious liabilities.
"Captain," interrupted Navigator Williams from her station near the forward viewports, "the alien commander is probably wondering why we haven't responded to their hails or powered up weapons."
Should I explain that we're not exactly following standard first contact procedures?
Negative, Chen replied, still studying the tactical display. Let them wonder.
The moment we start explaining ourselves according to their protocols, we're fighting by their rules. And humans don't win fights by following other people's rules. She turned to address the entire command crew. Listen up, people. Everything you learned about space combat in the Academy, everything the Galactic Council's military advisors taught us about proper engagement protocols, forget all of it. We're not here to have a polite military exercise with the Zephyrians. We're here to demonstrate why humanity earned its place in this galaxy by being too stubborn to die quietly. The alien fleet's formation was already adapting to the Defiance's approach. Chen watched as the 12 Zephyrian vessels began a slow rotation, bringing their heaviest weapons to bear while maintaining their protective formation. It was exactly the response she'd expected. Tactically sound, strategically predictable, and completely inadequate for dealing with an opponent who didn't share their fundamental assumptions about warfare. "Weapon status?" she asked. "All systems green," Brooks reported. "Kinetic batteries loaded and charged. Missile tubes ready. Electronic warfare suite standing by." Engineering reports that the main reactor is operating at acceptable parameters, which means it's probably violating about 15 different safety protocols, but Lieutenant Foster promises it won't explode until after we're done shooting. Good enough. How long until we reach optimal range? By their standards or ours? Chen's smile became distinctly predatory. Hours. 8 minutes, Captain. 8 minutes to close the remaining distance. 8 minutes before the Zephyrians learned that human military doctrine had been forged in the fires of total war, where survival mattered more than honor and victory went to whoever was willing to break the most rules. 8 minutes before they discovered that the ugliest ship in their neat, orderly formation was about to teach them what real warfare looked like. The Defiance continued its steady approach, still broadcasting no signals, still showing no hostile intent by galactic standards. But Captain Chen and her crew knew something the Zephyrians didn't. Sometimes, the most dangerous predator was the one that didn't look dangerous at all. In his command center aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Kethvar made a decision that would haunt his military career for centuries to come. Faced with an alien vessel that refused to follow established protocols, he chose to treat it as a minor diplomatic irritation rather than a potential threat. "Continue standard approach procedures," he ordered. "If they won't respond to communication, we'll wait until they reach minimum safe distance, and then escort them to the border station for proper first contact procedures." It was a reasonable decision, based on 10,000 years of civilized warfare, where reasonable decisions led to reasonable outcomes. But humanity had never been particularly interested in reasonable warfare, and the Defiance was about to prove that some rules existed only until someone was creative enough to break them. The countdown continued, 7 minutes and falling. Aboard the human vessel, Captain Chan began issuing orders that would have horrified any properly trained military officer in the galaxy. "Martinez, prepare for full-spectrum jamming on my signal. Brooks, I want firing solutions on all 12 targets. Not their weapons or engines, their sensor arrays. Williams, plot us a course that takes us through the center of their formation. Foster, I need maximum power to engines and weapons." "Captain," interrupted her executive officer, Commander Torres, "that course will take us within 200 kilometers of multiple enemy vessels. That's well inside their point defense range." "I'm counting on it," Chen replied calmly. "The Zephyrians have spent so long fighting opponents who engage at maximum range that their point defense systems are probably calibrated for long-distance interception. Get close enough and their own computers will start working against them." It was classic human tactical thinking. Identify your opponent's strengths and turn them into weaknesses. The Zephyrian military machine was powerful, sophisticated, and utterly unprepared for an enemy that treated their greatest advantages as exploitable vulnerabilities. 6 minutes remaining. In the Zephyrian fleet, Admiral Kethvar was beginning to experience the first stirrings of genuine concern. The human vessel showed no signs of slowing, and its course would bring it dangerously close to the Imperial Navy's most advanced warships. More troubling still, his sensors were detecting energy buildups throughout the alien vessel that didn't match any known weapon systems. "Sir," reported his science officer, "analysis of the human ship's construction suggests it's built for close-range combat. The armor configuration and weapon placement indicate they expect to engage at distances we would consider suicidally close." "How close?" Based on the design patterns, possibly within 1,000 kilometers, maybe closer.
The bridge fell silent. 1,000 kilometers was the distance at which ships docked for maintenance and supply transfers.
It was not a range at which civilized vessels conducted warfare. Sir, request permission to transmit a warning, suggested Communications Officer Yulton. They may not understand that their current approach constitutes a hostile act under galactic military law. HFY nodded slowly. Transmit on all frequencies. Unknown human vessel. You are approaching Imperial Navy ships in a manner that violates established military protocols. Adjust your course to maintain minimum safe distance of 10,000 kilometers, or you will be considered hostile and engaged accordingly. The message went out across space, carried by the same communication systems that had maintained order in the galaxy for millennia. But the humans had learned their military skills in a different school, where messages were less important than momentum, and warnings were just another weapon to be used against an unwary enemy. Aboard the Defiance, Martinez intercepted and translated the Zephyrian transmission in real time.
They're ordering us to back off or face the consequences, Captain. Very polite about it, though.
Ignore it, Chen ordered. How much time until we reach engagement range? 4 minutes, Captain. 4 minutes until the most lopsided battle in galactic history began in earnest. 4 minutes until a human warship demonstrated that sometimes the best way to fight a superior enemy was to change the rules so completely that their superiority became irrelevant. The Zephyrian fleet maintained its formation, weapons powered but not yet aimed, following protocols that had served the galaxy well for 10,000 years. The human vessel continued its approach, broadcasting no intentions and offering no explanations. And in the space between the two forces, the future of galactic warfare hung in the balance, waiting for someone to make the first move that would shatter 10 millennia of civilized combat forever. The moment arrived with devastating suddenness. Admiral HFY was still considering his options when every sensor on his flagship simultaneously screamed warnings. The human vessel had crossed the 3,000-kilometer mark and was accelerating directly toward the center of the Zephyrian formation. More alarming still, the ship's chaotic energy signature was resolving into recognizable patterns, all of them aggressive. "Sir, the human vessel has powered weapons," shouted Lieutenant Veltar. "Multiple energy signatures consistent with particle beam weaponry, kinetic launch systems, and something our computers can't classify." "Return fire authorization?" asked Weapons Officer Dracoon, his fingers hovering over the firing controls. HFY hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds that would define the next phase of galactic history. In those moments, he tried to apply 10,000 years of military protocol to a situation that had no precedent in civilized warfare. The humans were clearly hostile, but they hadn't actually fired yet. Proper procedure demanded graduated response, formal warnings, and escalation according to established patterns. The humans had no interest in proper procedure. Captain Chen stood in the Defiance's command center, watching the tactical display as her ship knifed through space toward the alien formation. The Zephyrian vessels were beautiful in their own way, sleek, symmetrical, and arranged in patterns that spoke of mathematical precision and aesthetic sensibility. They looked like the kind of ships that would fight honorable duels at reasonable distances, while their crews exchanged polite commentary about tactics and strategy. "Range to target formation, 2,000 kilometers and closing," reported Brooks from the tactical station. "Enemy vessels are powering weapons but haven't achieved target lock yet. Their targeting computers seem to be having trouble with our approach vector." Chen nodded grimly. That was exactly what human intelligence had predicted. The Zephyrian targeting systems were sophisticated beyond anything humanity had ever built, but they were designed to engage targets following predictable flight patterns. A ship accelerating directly through the center of their formation while broadcasting false sensor readings would confuse their computers long enough for the Defiance to get close. "Electronic warfare status?" "Martinez has their communication systems mapped and ready for disruption," Brooks replied. "We can cut their fleet coordination whenever you give the word." "Not yet. Let them maintain formation a little longer." The Zephyrian ships were reacting exactly as human analysts had predicted. Faced with an unprecedented tactical situation, they were falling back on standard procedures, rotating to bring weapons to bear, adjusting formation to maintain mutual support, preparing to engage at maximum effective range. It was textbook military doctrine, executed with precision, that would have impressed any civilized opponent. But Chen wasn't interested in impressing anyone. She was interested in winning. "Captain," interrupted Navigator Williams, "at current acceleration, we'll be inside their formation in 90 seconds. Once we're surrounded, their superior numbers will become a liability." Chen finished calmly. Brooks, prepare for close engagement protocols. I want targeting solutions on all 12 vessels, but not their weapons or engines. Target their sensor arrays, communication equipment, and navigation systems. Nam, disabling their sensors won't destroy them. They'll still be able to fight. Chen's smile was utterly without mercy. Who said anything about destroying them? We're going to do something much worse. We're going to humiliate them. Aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Kethvar was rapidly running out of options. The human vessel was now close enough that his ship's point defense systems were automatically engaging, filling space around the intruder with precisely targeted energy beams designed to intercept incoming missiles and small craft. But the human ship's armor was absorbing the defensive fire without apparent damage, and its trajectory remained unchanged. "Sir, recommend immediate full fleet engagement," urged Dracoon. "If we allow them to penetrate our formation, our own ships will be in each other's firing lines." It was sound tactical advice. Kethvar knew he should give the order to fire, should commit his superior numbers and firepower to destroying the human vessel before it could complete whatever suicidal attack run it was attempting. But something about the situation felt fundamentally wrong. The humans weren't behaving like any opponent he'd ever faced. They weren't trying to maximize damage while minimizing risk, weren't following any recognizable tactical doctrine, weren't even attempting to negotiate or explain their actions. They were doing something else entirely, something his 3 centuries of military experience couldn't classify. "Weapons free," he ordered finally. "All ships engage the human vessel with maximum firepower." 12 Zephyrian warships opened fire simultaneously, releasing more concentrated energy than most civilizations could generate in their entire electrical grid. Particle beams capable of vaporizing asteroid-sized targets converged on the human vessel from multiple angles. Guided missiles with warheads that could crack planetary shields honed in on the intruder's projected position. The display screens in the Zephyrian command center lit up with the unmistakable signatures of weapons impacts. Energy readings spiked as directed beams struck the human vessel's armor. Explosion markers appeared where missiles found their targets. For approximately 15 seconds, Admiral Kethvar believed he had solved the problem. Then the smoke cleared, and the human ship was still there. "Damage assessment," he barked, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. "Sir, all weapons impacted successfully," reported his science officer, voice tight with confusion. Energy transfer was consistent with total target destruction. But sensors show the human vessel is still operational, still on course, and appears to be completely undamaged. That's impossible. No ship can survive that level of concentrated fire without shields. Sir, the human vessel doesn't appear to be using energy shields at all. Their defensive system seems to be purely physical armor, but it's unlike any armor we've ever encountered. Captain Chen felt the Defiance shudder as Zephyrian weapons found their mark. But the ship's armor held exactly as designed. The outer ablative layers vaporized and scattered, absorbing and dissipating energy that would have destroyed any other vessel in the galaxy. Beneath the ablative coating, the main armor belt, a honeycomb of advanced composites and reactive materials developed in Earth's weapons labs, channeled the remaining force away from critical systems. "Damage report?" she asked calmly, as if her ship hadn't just survived what should have been total annihilation. "Outer hull sections 1 through 7 showing expected ablation," reported Chief Engineer Foster over the comm. "Main armor belt is holding well within acceptable parameters. Some minor system fluctuations, but nothing that'll slow us down. Estimate we can take approximately 15 more hits of that magnitude before armor degradation becomes critical." Chen nodded approvingly. Human military doctrine had always emphasized survival over aesthetics. While other civilizations built shields that failed dramatically when overloaded, humanity had developed armor that degraded gracefully under fire, allowing ships to remain operational long after conventional wisdom suggested they should have been destroyed. Range to target formation? 500 kilometers and closing rapidly, Brooks reported. Enemy vessels are attempting to adjust formation to maintain firing lines, but they're having trouble with coordination. Execute electronic warfare protocols. Full spectrum jamming, now. Martinez's fingers flew over his control systems, activating the most sophisticated electronic warfare suite ever deployed by human forces. Invisible signals flooded space around the Zephyrian formation, overwhelming their communication arrays with precisely crafted interference patterns. Target and computers lost lock as their sensors were fed false information. Navigation systems began reporting conflicting data as their connection to the fleet's central command network was severed. Within seconds, the perfectly coordinated Zephyrian formation began to come apart. "Sir, we've lost communication with vessels 7 through 12, reported the Zephyrian communications officer. Command network is down fleet-wide. Each ship is operating independently." Admiral Kethvar watched his tactical display fragment as the human electronic warfare attack stripped away his greatest advantage: the ability to coordinate 12 ships as a single fighting unit. Individual Zephyrian vessels were powerful, but their true strength lay in their ability to operate in perfect harmony, combining their firepower and defensive capabilities through instantaneous communication and shared targeting data. The humans had just taken that away from him. "Switch to backup communication systems," he ordered. "Sir, backup systems are also being jammed. The humans appear to be using broad-spectrum interference across all known communication frequencies. Then we fight as individual vessels until communication can be restored." But even as he gave the order, Kethvar realized the tactical nightmare he was facing. His ships were now scattered throughout a three-dimensional volume of space, each captain making independent decisions based on incomplete information. The human vessel was somewhere in the middle of that volume, moving at high speed through gaps in his formation that widened every second his ships remained uncoordinated. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Chen watched the alien formation collapse into chaos and smiled with satisfaction. "Perfect. Brooks, begin targeted engagement. I want their sensor arrays disabled, not destroyed. Martinez, prepare to transmit on Zephyrian military frequencies as soon as we complete the first attack run." "What message should I prepare, Captain?" "Something they'll understand. Tell them this is what happens when someone builds a warship that doesn't follow their rules." The Defiance completed its dive through the center of the Zephyrian formation, emerging on the far side with all enemy vessels now behind it. But instead of continuing away from the alien fleet, the human ship executed a maneuver that no Zephyrian tactical computer had been programmed to anticipate. It reversed course and headed back into the formation for a second pass. "They're coming around again," shouted Lieutenant Veltar aboard the Zephyrian flagship. "New heading suggests they're targeting the cruiser Determination." Admiral Kethvar could only watch as the human vessel demonstrated capabilities that violated everything he knew about space warfare. Ships simply didn't reverse course at high speed without massive deceleration followed by acceleration in the opposite direction. The energy requirements alone should have been prohibitive. Yet the human vessel had somehow executed a complete course reversal without appearing to slow down at all. "Sir, recommend we reposition the fleet to—" "We can't reposition anything without communication," Kethvar interrupted grimly. "Every ship is fighting independently now. All we can do is hope individual captains can adapt to whatever the humans are planning." What the humans were planning was a demonstration in applied creativity that would revolutionize military thinking throughout the galaxy. The Defiance approached the Zephyrian cruiser Determination at a relative velocity that made precise targeting theoretically impossible. But the human weapon systems weren't designed for precision. They were designed to solve problems. Brooks opened fire with a spread of kinetic penetrators. Simple metal slugs accelerated to relativistic speeds by magnetic launchers. The Zephyrians expected missile attacks that could be intercepted, or energy beams that could be absorbed by shields. They didn't expect ammunition that was literally just chunks of metal moving fast enough to punch through anything in the known universe. The kinetic rounds tore through the Determination sensor array like paper, shredding delicate equipment and leaving the Zephyrian cruiser effectively blind. Secondary impacts knocked out communication relays and navigation sensors. Within seconds, one of the most advanced warships in the galaxy had been reduced to a helpless hulk, drifting through space without the ability to see, hear, or coordinate with its fellows. The Defiance moved on to its next target. "Sir, the Determination has gone dark," reported the tactical officer aboard the Zephyrian flagship. No response to any hails. Last telemetry suggested total systems failure, but no indication of hull breach or catastrophic damage. Admiral Kethvar felt a chill of recognition. The humans weren't trying to destroy his fleet, they were trying to disable it, and they were succeeding with terrifying efficiency. "All remaining vessels concentrate fire on the human ship. Maximum power, all weapons." The order went out over short-range communication systems that the human electronic warfare couldn't completely jam. 9 remaining Zephyrian warships turned their guns on the human intruder, filling space with enough destructive energy to sterilize a small planet. Once again, the human ship emerged from the attack completely unharmed. Captain Chen felt the Defiance shake as another coordinated Zephyrian volley found its mark, but her ship's armor continued to hold. The ablative layers were wearing thin, and some of the deeper composite plates were showing stress fractures, but the vessel remained combat effective. Engineering report? Armor's down to about 60% effectiveness, Foster replied over the comm. We can probably take another 10 or 12 hits before we start losing critical systems. Recommend we finish this before they get lucky. Chen nodded and turned to Brooks. Time to end this demonstration. Target the flagship's command system specifically. I want their admiral to understand exactly what just happened to his fleet. The Defiance curved through space toward the Zephyrian command vessel, and Admiral HFY realized with growing horror that his perfectly trained, magnificently equipped, numerically superior fleet was about to be defeated by a single ship that looked like it had been assembled in someone's garage. The human vessel approached his flagship with the same casual confidence it had shown throughout the engagement, seemingly indifferent to the massive firepower still arrayed against it. And as it closed to point-blank range, HFY finally understood the lesson the humans had come to teach. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent wasn't the one with the best weapons or the strongest armor or the most sophisticated tactics. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent was the one who refused to fight by any rules you understood. The Defiance opened fire on the Zephyrian flagship, and Admiral HFY's war came to an end. The silence that followed the engagement was more unsettling than the battle itself. Admiral HFY sat in his command chair, staring at display screens that showed nothing but static. The human kinetic rounds had torn through his flagship's sensor array with surgical precision, leaving the mighty Zephyrian dreadnought as blind and helpless as every other vessel in his fleet. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to restore basic ship functions, but their efforts were hampered by the systematic destruction of every system needed for coordination and navigation. Damage assessment, he ordered, though he already knew the answer would be humiliating. Sir, all primary sensors are offline, reported Lieutenant Veltar, her voice tight with professional embarrassment. Communication array is 70% destroyed. Navigation sensors are completely down. We're operating on backup life support and internal power only. Weapons? All weapon systems are physically intact and fully powered. We could still fire if we had targets and a way to aim at them. That was perhaps the most galling aspect of the entire situation. The human ship hadn't destroyed his fleet. It had simply made them irrelevant. 12 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy sat dead in space, fully armed but unable to see, communicate, or coordinate with each other. They were like blind giants with loaded weapons and no idea where to point them. Sir, interrupted Communications Officer Yulton, we're receiving a transmission on emergency frequencies. It's from the human vessel. HFY straightened in his chair. Put it through. The voice that emerged from the speakers was crisp, professional, and utterly without mercy. Captain Sarah Chen spoke with the tone of someone dictating terms to a defeated enemy, which was exactly what she was doing. Admiral HFY of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy, this is Captain Chen, of the Earth vessel UES Defiance. Your fleet has been neutralized and is no longer combat effective. Your vessels are undamaged and your crews are unharmed, but you are currently unable to navigate, communicate, or coordinate defensive actions. This condition will persist until I decide otherwise. A pause, during which the full implications of the human's words sank in. The Defiance had effectively captured an entire Zephyrian battle fleet without killing a single alien or destroying a single ship. You have 30 minutes to consider your position, Chen continued. After that time, I will contact you again with terms for the restoration of your ship's capabilities. I suggest you use the interval to contact your superiors and explain that the rules of engagement in this galaxy have permanently changed. The transmission ended, leaving HFY alone with the wreckage of his military career and the growing realization that he had just witnessed the end of an era. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Chen walked through her ship's corridors, observing the controlled chaos that followed any successful military operation. Damage control teams sealed minor hull breaches left by Zephyrian weapons that had managed to penetrate the outer ablative layers. Engineering crews ran diagnostics on systems that had been pushed well beyond their design specifications. Medical teams treated crew members who'd been injured by the violent maneuvers required for close-range combat. It was organized pandemonium, the kind of productive confusion that human military units generated when they were accomplishing something important under difficult circumstances. Chen had seen it during the Titan Rebellion, the asteroid wars, and the dozen smaller conflicts that had shaped humanity's approach to warfare. Her crew knew how to function in crisis situations because they'd been trained by a species that treated crisis as the normal state of affairs. Their fleet commanders are trying to contact Imperial Navy headquarters, but they're having trouble explaining what happened. Chen paused to listen to the intercepted messages, which Martinez had fed through the ship's translation systems. The Zephyrian officers were struggling to find words in their own language for concepts that their military doctrine didn't recognize. Vessel disabled without destruction. Weapons intact but unusable. Formation disrupted by non-lethal engagement. Enemy ship undamaged despite concentrated fire. Each attempted report trailed off into frustrated silence as the alien officers realized they lacked vocabulary for describing their defeat. The Zephyrian military had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of destroying enemy vessels through superior firepower and tactical coordination. They had no words for what the humans had done to them. "Ma'am," interrupted Brooks from behind her, "request permission to speak freely?" Chen nodded, recognizing the tone. Brooks was one of her most experienced officers, a veteran of mining ship conflicts where survival depended on creative thinking rather than superior technology. If he had concerns about their tactics, she wanted to hear them. "Permission granted. What's on your mind?" "Captain, we just humiliated one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. They're not going to forget this, and they're sure not going to forgive it. When word gets out about what we did here, every alien military in known space is going to want a piece of us." Chen smiled grimly. "That's exactly the point, Brooks. We didn't come out here to make friends with the galactic military establishment. We came out here to establish that humanity doesn't follow their rules. But ma'am, we're one ship against thousands of alien vessels.
Even if our tactics give us an advantage, we can't fight the entire galaxy."
We're not going to fight the entire galaxy,
Chen replied calmly.
We're going to teach them that fighting humanity means accepting casualties and consequences they're not prepared for. The aliens have spent millennia conducting warfare like a gentleman's sport. Formal challenges, honorable duels, predictable outcomes. We're going to show them what happens when someone refuses to play by those rules. Brooks considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. He'd fought in enough human conflicts to understand the deeper strategy. Humanity had never won wars by being stronger or smarter than their enemies. They'd won by being more willing to do whatever it took to survive. The Zephyrians had superior technology and greater numbers, but they also had something humanity could exploit. A sense of honor that limited their tactical options. Understood, Captain. What are our next moves? We're going to contact Admiral Kethvar and explain exactly what we want in exchange for giving his fleet back its capabilities. Then we're going to demonstrate that dealing with humans means dealing with consequences that can't be solved by superior firepower. Meanwhile, in the depths of Zephyrian space, the implications of the Defiance's victory were spreading through military communication networks like wildfire. Fleet Admiral Zorex Vaughn, commander of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy, sat in his office aboard the massive orbital fortress that served as military headquarters for the entire Zephyrian Empire. Before him lay reports from Admiral Kethvar's fleet that defied every principle of military science he'd learned in 4 centuries of service. "Explain this again," he said to his chief intelligence officer, Commander Hildak. "Sir, a single human vessel engaged Admiral Kethvar's battle group and rendered all 12 ships combat ineffective without destroying any of them. The engagement lasted approximately 20 minutes from first contact to complete fleet neutralization. And our casualties? None, sir. No Zephyrian personnel were killed or seriously injured. The human vessel appears to have deliberately targeted only ship systems essential for coordination and navigation." Zorex Van studied the tactical reports with growing confusion. In his experience, battles ended when one side destroyed the other side's ability to fight. Ships were eliminated through hull breaches, engine failures, or the collapse of defensive systems. The idea of deliberately disabling an enemy fleet while leaving it physically intact was so alien to his thinking that he struggled to understand the strategic purpose. What do the humans want? That's unclear, sir. Captain Chen has demanded a direct communication link with Imperial Navy Command, but she hasn't specified her terms or objectives. Then open the link. Let's hear what they have to say. The communication that followed would be studied in military academies throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. Captain Chen appeared on the main display screen in the Zephyrian military headquarters, and Fleet Admiral Zorex Van got his first look at the human who just humiliated his best admiral and most advanced fleet. She was smaller than he'd expected. Humans were a compact species compared to most galactic civilizations, but there was something in her manner that suggested coiled violence barely held in check. Her ship's command center was visible behind her, and Zorex's fan was struck by how different it looked from any proper military installation. Where Zephyrian ships featured clean lines and orderly workstations, the human vessel seemed to be held together with creative engineering and stubborn determination. Fleet Admiral Zorex Van, Chen began without preamble. Your fleet commanders need to understand something about humanity before this situation escalates beyond anyone's ability to control it. Captain Chen, you have attacked Imperial Navy vessels without provocation or declaration of hostilities. This constitutes an act of war under galactic military law. Chen's smile was entirely without warmth. Fleet Admiral, with respect, galactic military law assumes that all participants recognize the same basic principles of warfare. Humanity does not. Then perhaps you would be willing to explain what principles you do recognize. STASAISA, Survival, Fleet Admiral. We recognize survival. Your people have spent 10,000 years fighting wars where the objective was to defeat your opponents according to mutually agreed-upon rules. Humanity has spent its entire history fighting wars where the only rule was not to die. Zorexvan felt a chill of recognition. The human captain was describing something that the Zephyrian military had never encountered, a civilization that treated warfare as a survival imperative rather than a formal contest between professional soldiers. What are your demands? He asked. No demands, Fleet Admiral. Just a demonstration and a warning. The demonstration is what happened to Admiral Kethvar's fleet. 12 of your finest vessels neutralized by a single human ship that your tactical computers couldn't classify and your weapons couldn't damage. The warning is that this engagement represents humanity operating under considerable restraint. Restraint? Chen's expression became genuinely frightening. Fleet Admiral, we disabled your ships without harming your crews because we wanted to deliver a message, not start a war. But if you force us to defend ourselves without restraint, you'll discover that humans have weapons and tactics your military doctrine has never considered. We've spent 10,000 years learning how to kill things that are bigger, stronger, and better armed than we are. Don't make us demonstrate those skills against civilized opponents. The transmission ended, leaving Fleet Admiral Zorexvan to contemplate a strategic nightmare that his military education hadn't prepared him for. The humans weren't operating according to any recognizable pattern of galactic warfare. They weren't trying to conquer territory, establish dominance, or achieve traditional military objectives. They were simply demonstrating that they couldn't be defeated by conventional methods, and warning that unconventional methods would have consequences the galaxy wasn't prepared to accept. Back aboard the Defiance, Captain Chen concluded her communication with the Zephyrian command structure and turned her attention to the immediate tactical situation. Admiral Kethvar's fleet remained dead in space, weapons intact but useless without targeting systems or coordination capabilities. The 12 disabled ships represented more firepower than most civilizations could generate, but they were as helpless as museum pieces until Chen decided to restore their functionality. Captain, reported Martinez from his communication station, we're detecting multiple FTL signatures on long-range sensors. Looks like additional Zephyrian fleets responding to Admiral Kethvar's emergency signals. How many ships? Difficult to determine precisely, but estimated 30 to 40 vessels across 3 separate fleet formations. They'll arrive within 6 hours if they maintain current speed. Chen nodded calmly. She'd expected reinforcements. The Zephyrians weren't the type to accept defeat without attempting to salvage the situation through superior numbers. But the incoming fleets would face the same fundamental problem as Admiral Kethvar's force. They'd been trained to fight opponents who shared their basic assumptions about warfare. Time to restore functionality to the disabled fleet? Engineering estimates 2 hours for full system restoration, reported Brooks. We can have them back to minimal operating capacity in 30 minutes if needed. Do it. I want Admiral Kethvar's ships operational before his reinforcements arrive. Ma'am, with respect, why are we giving them back their combat capability? We have them completely neutralized right now. Chen's smile was sharp with predatory satisfaction. Because, Brooks, we're not here to capture a Zephyrian fleet. We're here to make sure that every military commander in the galaxy understands what happens when someone tries to impose their rules of engagement on humanity. When those reinforcement fleets arrive, I want Admiral Kethvar's ships fully operational and standing beside us. Standing beside us, ma'am?
The Zephyrians are about to learn their second lesson in human military doctrine, Chen replied.
First, we showed them that their tactics don't work against opponents who refuse to follow their rules. Now we're going to show them what happens when humans choose their allies. The next phase of the engagement was about to begin, and it would redefine the balance of power in the galaxy. Admiral Kethvar felt his flagship systems come back online with a mixture of relief and profound unease. The sensation of recovering sight and hearing after hours of blind helplessness should have been cause for celebration, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the human captain was playing a game whose rules he didn't understand. All systems reporting normal function, announced Lieutenant Veltar from her restored tactical station. Sensors are online, communication arrays are operational, and navigation systems are fully responsive. Status of the fleet? All 12 vessels showing green across the board, sir. The humans appear to have completely restored our capabilities. Kefvar studied his tactical displays, trying to make sense of the situation. His fleet was operational, armed, and positioned within easy striking distance of the human vessel. By any reasonable analysis, he should order immediate engagement and destroy the ship that had humiliated the Imperial Navy. But Captain Chen had demonstrated that reasonable analysis didn't apply to humanity, and he was beginning to suspect that attacking the Defiance would be exactly the wrong response. "Sir," interrupted his communications officer, "priority transmission from the human vessel. Captain Chen requests permission to address you directly." Granted. Captain Chen's image appeared on the main display, and Kefvar was struck by how relaxed she appeared. She was standing in her ship's command center as if the presence of 12 armed Zephyrian warships posed no threat at all. "Admiral Kefvar, I trust your ships are now fully operational?" "They are. Though I confess I don't understand why you chose to restore our capabilities." Chen's smile was genuinely warm, which somehow made it more unsettling than her earlier expressions of controlled aggression. "Because, Admiral, we're about to have visitors, and I want to make sure you're in a position to make informed decisions about how to handle them." Before Kefvar could ask what she meant, his sensor operator called out a contact report that explained everything. "Sir, detecting multiple FTL emergence signatures. 3 fleet formations dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Preliminary count shows 37 vessels approaching at maximum sublight speed." Kefvar felt his heart sink. He recognized the formation patterns from the tactical displays. These were elite Zephyrian fleets commanded by officers who'd received orders to restore Imperial honor through superior firepower. They would arrive expecting to find the human vessel destroyed and their colleagues' humiliation avenged. Instead, they would find Admiral Kefvar's fleet apparently cooperating with the enemy. "Admiral," Chen continued, "those reinforcement fleets are going to demand that you engage my ship alongside them. They're going to expect you to participate in a coordinated attack designed to overwhelm my vessel through concentrated fire. And if I refuse, then you'll be accused of cowardice or treason by your own people. Your military career will end, your reputation will be destroyed, and you'll spend the rest of your life explaining why you chose to cooperate with an alien enemy instead of serving Imperial interests." Kefvar nodded grimly. Chen had summarized his situation with terrifying accuracy. The incoming fleets would expect him to redeem his earlier defeat through overwhelming force, and any refusal to participate would be interpreted as either incompetence or betrayal. However, Chen continued, "If you do attack my ship, you'll discover that the engagement you just survived was humanity operating under considerable restraint. The next battle will demonstrate what happens when humans stop worrying about minimizing casualties and focus entirely on survival." "Are you threatening to destroy my fleet if I cooperate with my own people?" Chen's expression became deadly serious. "Admiral, I'm explaining that you have a choice to make. You can order your ships to attack alongside the reinforcements, in which case I'll defend myself using methods that your military doctrine has never anticipated. Or you can refuse to participate in what will essentially be a massacre and accept the personal consequences of that decision." "What makes you so confident that 37 additional ships won't succeed where 12 failed?" "Because those 37 ships were built and crewed according to the same principles as your original fleet. They'll approach the engagement with the same tactical assumptions, the same strategic doctrine, and the same fundamental misunderstanding of what they're facing." Chen paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a note of something that might have been regret. "Admiral, your people have built a magnificent military machine based on 10,000 years of civilized warfare. Your ships are beautiful, your crews are professional, and your tactics are elegant. But you've never fought an opponent who is willing to do anything necessary to survive, and you're not prepared for the psychological reality of that kind of warfare." The transmission ended, leaving Kefvar to contemplate an impossible decision. On one side lay military duty and the expectations of his civilization. On the other lay the growing certainty that Captain Chen was absolutely right about the consequences of continued hostilities. Fleet Admiral Dexar commanded the lead reinforcement group, and his approach to the tactical situation was refreshingly straightforward. He'd built his career on the principle that superior firepower, properly applied, could solve any military problem. The reports he'd received about Admiral Kefvar's defeat were obviously exaggerated. No single vessel could neutralize 12 Imperial warships without sustaining catastrophic damage. "Tactical assessment," he ordered as his fleet approached the battle site. "Sir, long-range sensors confirm Admiral Kefvar's fleet is intact and operational. They appear to be maintaining station approximately 1,000 kilometers from the human vessel. Damage status on the human ship? Sir, that's unclear. The vessel appears to be fully operational, but its hull configuration doesn't match our initial intelligence reports. Large sections of the outer armor appear to have been completely destroyed, but the ship shows no signs of reduced capability. Dexar frowned at the tactical display. The human vessel should have been a drifting wreck after engaging 12 Zephyrian warships. Instead, it appeared to be intact and actively maneuvering. Either Admiral Kethvar's fleet had failed to engage properly, or something was fundamentally wrong with the intelligence reports about human capabilities. Communication from Admiral Kethvar's flagship, reported his communications officer. Put him through. Kethvar appeared on the display screen, and Dexar was immediately struck by his colleague's expression. Instead of the embarrassed anger he'd expected from an officer seeking to redeem a tactical failure, Kethvar looked like someone who'd seen something that fundamentally challenged his understanding of reality. Admiral Dexar, I need to brief you on the tactical situation before you commit your forces. The situation appears straightforward, Admiral. One alien vessel surrounded by Imperial Navy ships. I assume you've been maintaining position until reinforcements arrived to ensure the enemy couldn't escape. The human vessel has been maintaining position, Admiral. We haven't been constraining their movements. They've been allowing us to maintain ours. Dexar felt a chill of unease. That wasn't the kind of statement that made sense in any tactical context he recognized. Explain, Admiral. The human ship disabled my entire fleet without destroying a single vessel or killing a single crew member. They then restored our functionality and have been waiting for reinforcements to arrive. I believe they want to demonstrate something to the Imperial Navy, and I strongly recommend we listen to whatever they have to say before committing to hostile action. Admiral Kethvar, are you suggesting that the Imperial Navy should negotiate with a single alien vessel that has committed acts of war against our forces? I'm suggesting that what we think of as acts of war may not be how the humans categorize their actions. And I'm strongly recommending that we consider the possibility that our standard tactical approaches may be inadequate for dealing with opponents who don't share our basic assumptions about warfare. The communication ended, leaving Dexar to puzzle over his colleague's apparent loss of nerve. But before he could formulate a response, his own communications officer announced an incoming transmission from the human vessel. Captain Chen appeared on his display screen, and Dexar got his first direct look at the alien who'd supposedly humiliated one of the Empire's best admirals. She was smaller and more fragile-looking than he'd expected, standing in what appeared to be a makeshift command center that bore no resemblance to any proper military installation. Fleet Admiral Dexar, I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel UES Defiance. I understand you're here to restore Imperial honor by destroying my ship through superior numbers. Captain Chen, you have committed acts of war against the Zephyrian Empire. Surrender your vessel immediately or face the consequences of continued hostilities. Chen's smile was utterly without fear. Fleet Admiral, before you commit your forces to this engagement, I want to make sure you understand exactly what you're ordering your people to do. I'm ordering them to destroy an enemy vessel that has attacked Imperial ships without provocation. No, sir. You're ordering them to participate in what will essentially be a slaughter. Not of my crew, of yours. Dexar felt his anger rising. The human captain was displaying the kind of arrogance that could only come from someone who'd never faced truly overwhelming force. Captain, you are one ship facing 49 Imperial vessels. Your tactical position is hopeless. Fleet Admiral, let me ask you a question. In your military experience, have you ever fought an opponent who is primarily concerned with killing as many of your people as possible? The question caught Dexar off guard. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. Your people fight wars where the objective is to achieve specific strategic goals through superior tactics and firepower. You engage opponents who share similar objectives and similar constraints. Have you ever fought an opponent whose primary goal was simply to kill as many of your people as possible before they died? Dexar found himself struggling to answer. Zephyrian military doctrine was based on achieving victory through tactical superiority and professional competence. The idea of fighting an opponent whose sole objective was maximum casualties was outside his conceptual framework. I thought not, Chen continued. Fleet Admiral, if you attack my ship with 49 vessels, I'm not going to try to outmaneuver you or outgun you. I'm going to try to kill as many of your people as possible before my ship is destroyed. And I'm very good at killing things. You're threatening to commit war crimes if we defend ourselves? Chen's expression became genuinely sad. Fleet Admiral, the concept of war crimes assumes that all participants recognize the same basic rules about acceptable military conduct. Humanity doesn't recognize those rules when our survival is at stake. She leaned forward, and her voice took on a tone of absolute conviction.
Sir, we came to this system to deliver a message, not to start a war. But if you force us to fight for our survival, we'll use every weapon and tactic we've ever developed, including ones your people will consider abhorrent.
The choice is yours. Allow us to complete our mission and leave peacefully, or discover what happens when humans stop trying to minimize casualties and focus entirely on maximizing them. The transmission ended, leaving Fleet Admiral Dexar to contemplate a strategic problem that his military training hadn't prepared him for.
He was facing an opponent who claimed to be willing to abandon every principle of civilized warfare in favor of pure destructive capacity.
Aboard the Defiance, Captain Chen turned away from the communication console and addressed her senior officers. Opinions? Commander Torres spoke first.
Captain, I think we may have pushed this demonstration as far as we can. We're facing overwhelming numbers, and even human tactics have limits. Brooks? Ma'am, our ammunition supplies are adequate for extended engagement, but if they coordinate properly, 49 ships can generate enough firepower to overwhelm our armor through sheer volume.
Chen nodded thoughtfully. Her officers were right. The Defiance could inflict massive casualties on the Zephyrian reinforcements. But the ship probably wouldn't survive the encounter intact.
The question was whether the demonstration would be worth the cost. Martinez, are you detecting any changes in the Zephyrian fleet formations? Yes, ma'am.
The three reinforcement groups are slowing their approach and requesting coordination with Admiral Kethvar's ships. They appear to be planning a coordinated assault with all 49 vessels attacking simultaneously.
And Admiral Kethvar's response?
That's interesting, Captain. Kethvar's ships are maintaining their current position rather than joining the assault formation. It looks like he's refusing to participate in the attack. Chen smiled grimly. Admiral Kethvar was making the right choice for his people, even though it would probably end his military career. The veteran officer had recognized that attacking the Defiance would result in casualties that the Zephyrian Empire wasn't prepared to accept.
Time to finish this demonstration, she announced. All hands, prepare for maximum effort engagement.
We're going to show the galaxy what happens when someone forces humanity to fight for survival. The final phase of the engagement was about to begin, and it would leave an indelible mark on galactic military doctrine for generations to come. The attack came at dawn. Ship's time aboard the Defiance. Fleet Admiral Dexar had decided that overwhelming force was the only appropriate response to human arrogance, and he committed 37 ships to a coordinated assault designed to vaporize the alien vessel in the opening seconds of engagement. His fleet approached in perfect formation, weapons charged to maximum power, targeting computers locked onto the human ship's center of mass. It was exactly the kind of textbook military operation that had defined galactic warfare for 10,000 years. Professional, efficient, and absolutely devastating when applied against conventional opponents. Captain Chen watched the approaching Zephyrian formation on her tactical displays and felt a familiar mixture of anticipation and regret. The aliens were about to learn why humanity had survived every attempt to destroy it, but the lesson would cost both sides more than anyone wanted to pay.
All stations report ready, Captain, announced Commander Torres from her position at the tactical coordination console. Weapon systems are charged, defensive measures are active, and all crew members are secured for maximum acceleration combat. Chen nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands. This is the captain. We are about to engage 37 enemy vessels in what will likely be our final battle. The aliens have chosen to force this confrontation despite our attempts to avoid unnecessary casualties. We will defend ourselves using every weapon and tactic at our disposal. Remember that we're not just fighting for our own survival. We're fighting to establish humanity's place in this galaxy. Make them remember us. The countdown to engagement ticked towards 0, and Chen began issuing orders that would have horrified any civilized military observer. Martinez, activate all electronic warfare systems. I want total communication disruption across their entire fleet. Brooks, prepare nuclear-tipped missiles for proximity detonation. I want electromagnetic pulses that will fry their electronics at range. Foster, give me everything the reactor can handle. We're going to push this ship beyond its design specifications.
Captain, interrupted Torres, the nuclear weapons will irradiate this entire region of space. Any survivors will suffer radiation exposure. Noted, Chen replied coldly. The Zephyrians chose to force this engagement despite our warnings. They'll have to live with the consequences. Aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Fleet Admiral Dexar watched his formation close the final distance to the human vessel. At this range, concentrated fire from 37 ships would overwhelm any defensive system ever built. The engagement should be over in seconds.
All ships report ready to engage, announced his tactical officer. Target lock confirmed across the fleet. Request permission to fire. Granted. All ships open fire. The space around the Defiance erupted in destructive energy as 37 Zephyrian warships released their combined firepower. Particle beams capable of melting asteroid cores converged on the human vessel. Guided missiles with antimatter warheads homed in on their target. Energy weapons that could crack planetary shields fired simultaneously in the most concentrated display of military power the galaxy had ever seen. For exactly 4 seconds, Fleet Admiral Dexar believed he had solved the human problem. Then the Defiance emerged from the inferno, battered but intact, and began its counterattack. The first indication that something was terribly wrong came when every Zephyrian ship simultaneously lost communication with the rest of the fleet. The human electronic warfare attack was unlike anything in their experience. Instead of simply jamming communication frequencies, it was actively rewriting the software in their communication systems, turning their own equipment against them. "Sir, we've lost all fleet coordination," reported the communications officer aboard Dexar's flagship. "All ships are operating independently. Switch to backup systems." "Sir, backup systems are also compromised. The human jamming appears to be specifically designed to target Zephyrian military communication protocols." Before Dexar could respond, his sensors detected multiple missile launches from the human vessel. But these weren't conventional weapons. They were moving too slowly and broadcasting active sensor signatures that made them easy to track. "Point defense systems engaging human missiles," reported his tactical officer. "Interception solutions confirmed." The Zephyrian point defense grid opened fire, destroying the incoming missiles at safe distance from the fleet. It was exactly what their systems were designed to do: identify incoming threats and eliminate them before they could reach their targets. What the point defense systems couldn't anticipate was that the missiles were designed to be intercepted, and that their destruction was actually the intended outcome. The nuclear warheads detonated simultaneously across a 3-dimensional volume of space surrounding the Zephyrian fleet, releasing electromagnetic pulses that propagated through the formation at the speed of light. Every electronic system on every ship was subjected to energy levels that exceeded their design specifications by orders of magnitude. Within seconds, 37 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy were reduced to drifting hulks, their computers fried, their weapons offline, their life support systems failing. Captain Chen watched the results of her attack with professional satisfaction and personal regret. The electromagnetic pulse weapons were brutally effective against any opponent who relied on sophisticated electronics, but they were also indiscriminate in their effects. The Zephyrian crews were probably struggling with life support failures and radiation exposure in addition to the loss of their ship systems. "Damage assessment?" she asked. "Multiple hits on our outer armor," reported Brooks. "We've lost most of the ablative plating, and some of the secondary armor is showing stress fractures, but primary systems are intact. Estimate we can survive approximately 3 more engagements of that intensity. Casualties? 6 crew members injured during the high acceleration maneuvers, but no fatalities. Medical teams are handling treatment." Chen nodded and turned her attention to the tactical situation. 37 enemy ships were now floating dead in space, helpless and probably suffering equipment failures that endangered their crews. Admiral Kethvar's 12 vessels remained operational, but had made no move to engage. The demonstration was complete, but the cost was higher than she'd wanted. "Martinez, open a channel to all Zephyrian vessels." "Channel open, Captain." Chen's voice carried across space to every surviving ship in the 2 fleets, and her words would be recorded and studied in military academies throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. "Zephyrian naval personnel, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel UES Defiance. Your attack fleet has been neutralized, but your crews are still alive. We will now demonstrate the difference between human military doctrine and civilized warfare." She paused, allowing the implications of her statement to sink in. "According to galactic military law, you are now legitimate targets for destruction. Your ships are disabled, your crews are helpless, and we have every right to finish what you started. However, humanity doesn't wage war against helpless opponents. We're going to restore your life support systems and provide medical assistance to your injured personnel." The broadcast continued as Chen outlined the terms for Zephyrian survival: complete withdrawal from the system, recognition of human sovereignty over their own military operations, and acceptance that humanity would not be bound by galactic military conventions that assumed civilized opponents. But the most important part of her message was what she said about the future. To every military commander listening to this transmission, remember what happened here. The Zephyrian Imperial Navy committed 49 of their finest ships to destroying 1 human vessel. They failed, and they failed because they assumed we would fight according to their rules. Her voice took on a tone of absolute conviction. Humanity will defend itself using whatever methods are necessary for survival. We don't recognize limitations based on galactic law, military tradition, or civilized conduct when our existence is threatened. If you force us to choose between our principles and our survival, we will choose survival every time. And we will use methods that your military doctrine has never anticipated. The transmission ended, leaving both fleets to contemplate the implications of what they'd witnessed. Admiral Kethvar sat in his command chair, watching as human technical teams began emergency repairs on the disabled Zephyrian vessels. The alien ship's crew was working with professional efficiency to restore life support and medical facilities to ships they'd just defeated in combat. It was an act of mercy that highlighted the terrifying restraint the humans had shown throughout the engagement. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "Fleet Admiral Zorixesvan is requesting immediate contact from Imperial headquarters." Kethvar nodded wearily. He was going to have to explain to his superiors that the Imperial Navy had just suffered the most complete tactical defeat in its 10,000-year history, and that the victorious enemy was now providing humanitarian assistance to the survivors. The conversation that followed would reshape military thinking throughout the galaxy. "Admiral Kethvar," came Zorixesvan's voice over the communication link, "report your status immediately." "Sir, Fleet Admiral Dexar's attack fleet has been completely neutralized by the human vessel. All 37 ships are disabled but intact. Casualties appear to be minimal, but precise numbers are unavailable. The human ship is currently providing emergency assistance to disabled vessels." A long pause. "Admiral, are you telling me that a single alien vessel defeated 37 Imperial warships and is now rendering humanitarian aid to the survivors?" "Yes, sir. And, sir, I recommend immediate suspension of all military operations against human vessels pending complete review of our tactical doctrine." "Explain." Kethvar took a deep breath and delivered the assessment that would change the course of galactic history. "Sir, the humans don't fight wars the way we understand warfare. They don't engage in formal contests between professional militaries operating under shared rules. They fight for survival using methods that our doctrine considers unthinkable. If we continue to treat them as conventional opponents, we'll continue to suffer defeats that our military structure can't sustain." Another pause. Longer this time. "What are you recommending, Admiral?"
"Sir, I recommend that we formally acknowledge human military sovereignty and negotiate treaties that establish mutual non-aggression based on respect rather than shared military doctrine."
The humans are willing to coexist peacefully, but they won't be constrained by military traditions they had no part in creating. The recommendation was accepted, and within 6 months, the Galactic Council had established the first military treaties with humanity based on the acknowledgement that some civilizations operated according to fundamentally different rules of engagement. Captain Chen stood in her ship's observation lounge, watching as the last of the disabled Zephyrian vessels regained power and began their withdrawal from the system. The demonstration was complete, and humanity had established its place in galactic affairs not through diplomacy or trade agreements, but through the simple expedient of proving that they couldn't be defeated by conventional military means. "Captain," said Commander Torres, joining her at the observation window, "communication from Earth Command. They're requesting a full report on the engagement." Chen smiled grimly. "Tell them the mission was successful. The galaxy now understands that humanity doesn't fight by their rules. And what happens next?" Chen turned away from the window and headed toward the bridge. "Next, we go home and build more ships like this one. Because now that the galaxy knows what we're capable of, they're going to want to make sure they never have to find out what we can do when we're really trying to win." The UES Defiance set course for Earth, leaving behind a transformed galaxy where the ancient rules of civilized warfare had been permanently rewritten by a species that refused to accept limitations on their right to survive. And in the vast reaches of space, other civilizations began to reconsider their assumptions about military power, tactical doctrine, and the fundamental nature of warfare itself. The humans had taught them that sometimes the most dangerous opponent wasn't the one with the strongest weapons or the most sophisticated tactics. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent was the one who refused to play by any rules except their own.